So basically, how are you guys doing this first year back on land after accomplishing this really big goal of sailing across the Pacific? How's that transition been? What's been the hardest part of that transition?
Yeah, the transition has been in some ways really nice. It's been nice to be back to the comforts of land life, where we have a dishwasher. And I was telling somebody the other day about doing laundry on the boat, and we had a small boat, a 34-foot boat. And so we had a 5-gallon bucket and we had a plunger. And Andreas, my husband, was the one who had to plunge all of the laundry, and then we would wring it out by hand and then hang all of our clothes. I mean, all of our underwear, everything all around the boat so it could dry for the whole world to see. And so you would go from, your boat to somebody else's boat, and it would be laundry on their boat. And you would go and you see all of their clothes, all of their personal items just on display. So
see all their underwear hanging out.
Exactly. Really, yeah. Like, I never thought you would be wearing red, but no. So it's a funny experience to do laundry on the boat, and it's really nice to have a washer and dryer. But we miss the daily adventure. When you're on a boat, there's some days that are really tough, and you don't know where you're going to sleep that night. But then there are other days when you think, like, let's go snorkeling, and it's the best snorkeling you've ever done in your life. And so I think we miss the daily adventure that is involved when you go on it. Yeah. And just this sense of excitement. And Rick, that it goes both ways. The highs are highs and the lows are lows. And when you're in a rocky anchorage all night, it really is tough.
That's the truth.
So we're glad to be back. But we also miss the adventure quite a bit.
Do you still kind of unsure, I guess, on what direction you're going next? And I guess you've been book touring, and I saw you at the boat show, which was really cool. Still trying to figure it out then?
Yeah, so we didn't know. My husband went back to work. He can work remote, and so he went back to work like even before we sold our boat. But I wanted to get the co-captain's log, my new book, out into people's hands, into readers' hands, as soon as possible. And so that's what I've been focusing on basically the whole year, just getting all of the stories ready for a general audience, a sailor's audience, and people who don't know anything about sailing. And so I think the last kind of step in that is I'm recording an audio version so you can hear our own voices tell the stories. So that's kind of the next step. And then we're going to decide where we are going to live forever, or at least the next year.
You'll never know where you're going to live forever. Probably.
I know. That's
people
true.
Like us don't really. It's really hard.
I agree.
Did you always know that was your plan to always write a book even before you left, or like did you have? I guess you had it all planned out that it was going to be like a logbook style, and you had sort of the idea in mind. And have you always wanted to write a book?
I have never wanted to write a book, and until about a year ago, I didn't ever think I would write a book. As we were setting off on this adventure, I wanted to give some updates to like 50 or so people who are friends and family, to tell them this is where we are and this is what's happening. And maybe the second month that we were out, we were in the last class that had you sail overnight as kind of your last like hoop hurdle to jump over, your last hoop to jump to get certified to do night sailing. And we ran into a stealth warship in the Strait of Juan de Fuca. And I was terrified, and I was terrified and also exhilarating. And so I thought, I have got to share this story with all kinds of people. Like, I know all kinds of people who want to read a story about running into a warship at night in the middle of the night. And so I wrote the whole story on the notes app of my phone, maybe 2 or 3 hours after it happened. And so when people read it, they said, I feel like I'm with you in the boat as you see the warship. And that's because it was written, as it was happening, maybe like an hour or 2 delay. So that kind of started. And then the next time I thought, I have another story. And then the next time I had another story. And so it became, my just email updates became narratives and logs from each month, and people loved them. And, my readership went from, 50 people that I knew and who knew me well to like 900 people who, I never met, or I would meet in the South Pacific. They would say, I saw your story in Cruising World. So once I have, at the end of 2.5 years, I had quite a few stories. And so I decided, yeah, let's turn it into a book. So it's the co-captain's log. It's right behind you in the video.
Exactly. Yep. I got it right there. That is, yeah, writing. What was the hardest part about writing a book? Like, I mean, I guess a lot of it, reading through it, was already written in a sense. You kind of wrote it as you went, and then you edited it. And yeah, how was that whole process?
Yeah. So yeah, it wasn't that hard to do. A lot of people are trying to write books now. It's almost like it's the new triathlon or the Tough Mudder, that it's on their bucket list to write a book. I would say one is, it's really hard to write a book. Luckily, I did have most of the first draft done. What was really kind of a challenge was we wanted to give people the experience of following along on the Pacific Crossing. So a lot of our friends were with us, checking daily or sometimes hourly to see where we were in the process. And we wanted to give people who followed us afterward, who have the book in their hand, that same experience. And so my husband, who is a software engineer, he heard what I was looking for. And together we came up with this concept where even afterward, you can sign up for our daily email updates and you cross the Pacific along with us. So one is, that was hard because I've never heard of another book where you stop in the middle of the book and it's almost like a choose your own adventure where time stops. And so, try to figure out what that would look like and what things would make you feel like you're on the boat. So for example, we included a picture and a video in each day's entry. We included our own recordings of our logs so that you could listen to the emotion in our voice instead of just reading it. And then, so that conceptually was hard to put together. What kind of reader experience did we want to give people? And then it was hard to just code it. People keep asking, what software did you use? And we didn't use software. Andres coded it from scratch. And so that was a challenge. I think that was the biggest challenge of writing the book, was doing something new for readers that's never been done, conceptually and also logistically, tactically. How do you create this user experience?
You told me once, but just for everyone listening, tell me about how you guys met.
Yeah. I was living in Bellingham, which, Rick, you've lived in Bellingham too, a little bit. I've spent some time there. And I hated that it rained all the time. And I thought, okay, if it's going to rain all the time, there might as well be some snow. So I signed up for ski lessons. And my little old car wouldn't make it up the mountain. And I signed up for the ski bus that was green, and it was, the driver was probably high, most definitely hungover.
For sure.
Blaring Pink Floyd. And I'm on the bus with a bunch of Western University students, except there's this one guy who is next to me, and he's telling me, I think I want to hike to Stehekin, which is in the Cascades. I want to kayak in the Everglades, and I want to sail around the world. And I thought, you are crazy. And then I thought, well, you're kind of cute. So yeah, so let's do it. So I think a lot of stories start like that. Boy meets girl, they fall in love and they go crazy and buy a boat and sail around the world. So that's how we started.
That's awesome. How long?
How did you start? How did
I start sailing?
Yeah.
I grew up around the water in the Florida Keys, so I had a really awesome childhood. We were just always like spearfishing. My dad had a power boat, like a center console boat. And even when I was like 4 or 5 years old, my parents took like a month or two, and we had this 30-foot Hunter sailboat. We sailed around the Bahamas when we were just like super small kids. And I wasn't into sailing at all. It wasn't a part of my life until, I guess, just boating, regular power boating was. And I was really into like spearfishing. Then I got into underwater photography, and somehow that led to I found out this lifestyle about sailing. Like, oh, if I get into this sailing lifestyle, I can literally live this life I want if I just choose to live on a boat, and I can be around this all the time. And then I decided I didn't have any money. Like after college, I worked for a year in a finance job. And then I was like, well, this isn't for me. A buddy of mine suggested I work on super yachts. He's like, oh, you should be a yachty. I was like, I didn't even know what that was. That was before Below Deck. And I looked into it. A friend of my dad, somebody my dad knew. My dad knew someone who hooked me up with my first job working as like a deckhand mate on a 80-foot sailboat in St. Thomas. Then we did our first like delivery across the Caribbean Sea, started working on charters in Belize. And then one thing just like spiraled into the other. And then as soon as I had enough money to buy my first boat, I bought it. And it was just, yeah, it kind of just spiraled into 9 years of evolution of working on yachts and fixing up my own boats. And it was the never-ending pitfall, but the whole goal was always like South Pacific. So obviously that was the main focus, and battled a lot for that. And that didn't go exactly as planned, but it was still good.
Yeah. That's funny, Rick, because, one thing about water and sailing is that you hear a lot of different stories about, you clearly grew up sailing and at least in that culture. And I didn't start sailing. I didn't even know people sailed really until like my late 20s. But then I met someone today who was telling me he started sailing at 65 and he has his captain's license and he's gone to all of these places. And what I think is so cool about sailing is that the adventure is waiting for you whenever you're ready to find it.
Yeah, for sure. It's kind of, it's just like anything really in life. It's never, it really, as long as you're moving and you're breathing, like whatever it is, why not go attack something that you're interested in? Like if you're interested in something, go at it. It's all just like our self-limiting beliefs of that we're too old or that we're scared to get into something new because we're going to be bad at it. And that's just you have to suck at something in order to be good. What's this quote? There's a quote I love that says like, in order to start at something, in order to be great at something, you have to start. In order to start, you got to be soccer or something like that.
Yeah. And I think I talk about this in the Co-Captain's Log, but one of the things that is challenging with sailing or learning to sail as an adult is that as a kid, you learn new things all the time. But by the time, you've grown up and have, gauge competence or have a specialty, then it's hard to remember those days where you didn't know how to do something. And it's hard to know, it's hard to get over the tough parts of the learning curve.
Learning again. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And so one thing that sailing does is it allows you to climb the learning curve anew. And it's tough to do that. But also what's nice about sailing is that very often, if you can stick with it, there's going to be a magical day on the water that you think, this is why we sail.
Absolutely. Do you think, speaking of that, I always find it interesting which stories you tend to tell the most and which stories come up most. Because for some reason, for me, it always seems like the stories you remember the most are actually, the good times are great and those are good and memorable, but the ones that you seem to tell others the most are actually the bad stories. And when all like the ironic, funny, whatever it is, boat problems or, I don't know why it is, but those just seem to come up a lot more. And I think people are just more interested in those for some reason.
Yeah, I think people are interested in drama. And I think that the rough stories, you probably, in some ways, are you tired of telling the Rainmancer sort like that one or,
I was tired when it first happened. There was like the first 2 or 3 months, I was tired of telling it for sure. But since a lot of that has worn off, I don't mind occasionally telling it. And yeah, it is. It's obviously it's hard for me to talk about sailing without talking about that because that was my big goal. And then the whale crashed into my boat and it sank, and that's it's kind of a big deal. It's kind of a big asterisk. But yeah, I don't mind telling the story. It's always funny telling it to people that aren't around, that aren't actual boaters, because they're the ones that their minds are a lot more blown by it.
Yeah. So and we can get into this a little bit later, but I broke my leg. And that is the story.
I'm going to ask you about that. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the story. This like traumatic story is the one that people always really want to hear and want to know all the details about. And and if you read the book, that's the hook of the story, how that happens.
Yeah, exactly. That's the story in the whole book that stands out the most to me.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things I was going to ask you is like, so you start out on your sailing trip and you're coming down the coast, I think, of Oregon, then Northern California, and you're getting in your first port. big wave hits you. I think Andreas almost falls overboard or something, and then you end up with a shattered kneecap.
Yeah.
And then you guys basically limp into port, and then you're celebrating in the hospital, getting x-rays and figuring out that you're severely injured on your first like big sailing trip. How do you like maintain your optimism and positivity after that? So like, because most people after that would be like, this is a clear sign that I should stop sailing. It's telling me right now, let's just hang it up. We tried, but my kneecap shattered. How'd you manage to, push through that and like, I guess, stay optimistic and positive?
Yeah, so it was traumatic, and it was not, there was one wave that pushed us down, but it was about sailing for 36 hours off the coast, the Cape of Mendocino, and it was terrible. We never again heard waves like that. We never experienced conditions like that all the way across the Pacific until we landed in New Zealand. One thing that was really helpful was I went to a doctor, a sports medicine doctor, and he's not a sailor, but he runs and mountain bikes. And he said, Katherine, do not make any decisions while you're in pain. And to me, that was very helpful to things like, okay, I'm going to let myself recover from the initial shock, which was, oh my goodness, we have got to stop this. I got to put off the decision for a little while to let me process what had happened. So that was the first one, is that I delayed the decision. We didn't get off the boat and I was like, we're never doing this again. Or I didn't feel like I had to decide right away were we going to do it or not. Unfortunately, we did have weather windows, which if you are familiar with sailing at all, you know that you go when the weather allows you to and you stay when it doesn't. So we had about 6 weeks from the time that I broke my leg till the time that we felt we needed to be in Southern California before the weather really switched. So that is not a lot of time for physical therapy or for your leg to heal. And in the end, I got back on the boat with my leg still in a brace, a full leg brace. So we did get back on the boat. And one of the things that I think is really helpful is I come from corporate America, and there were a lot of tools that I brought from my life that I never thought would be applicable in sailing. But one of them was an after action review or a hot wash. It's in corporate America, but it's also in the military, armed services. And it's where we went through this exercise and we decided, okay, what did we do well in that incident and why? What went wrong and why? And how are we going to do it differently the next time? And so a couple things that exercise did is that gave us competence to know, we did this incorrectly. One of the things that happened is we were doing a sail change, trying to furl our head sail and put out a staysail, and we got it messed up, and we discovered in the hot wash or in the AAR that we were missing a winch on the side. And so when we were on, I think, a starboard tack, we don't have enough winches to do it. So we had to reconfigure the way that we did it. And we also decided, okay, next time we would probably use the whisker pole, which we had on the boat. We didn't know how to use it. We would figure out how to put the whisker pole out and go under general alone. And if you're not familiar with sailing, that's fine. But it gave us competence that we used in the Sea of Cortez. We really tried it out and it worked. And then when we did the Pacific crossing, we had 5 days of 35 knot winds, and we deployed the tactics that we developed in the AAR. And so that was a big to build competence is really great. And then it builds our confidence. When you break your leg at sea and your husband goes overboard, luckily he was tethered, so he came back on board, but he was hypothermic because he went into the water. We learned, it's easy to think we did nothing right, because when you have such a traumatic incident, it's easy to come up with a list of all the things you did wrong. But we did some things right. And so it enabled us to say, okay, we may have not been perfect, but there are things that we were good at and we can get better. I mean, I'm sure you felt the same way. I mean, you had the accident in the middle of the sea, but you had life rafts and you were prepared and you knew what to do as a captain. And so I think doing that kind of reflection, especially with your partner or whoever's on board, it really helps to build competence and confidence.
Yeah, I think that's just a good way to look at everything, and that's how you just get better, whatever it is in life,
Yeah.
relationships, business, sports, like, okay, what did I do wrong? I mean, that's how you learn from the failures. You don't learn from the stuff you did right. So
Right.
that's the way to look at it. But in your case, that's one thing, like looking at the logistics of, okay, I can see you guys taking it. What did we do right? What did we do wrong? Why did this happen? But still, just I guess from overall morale standpoint,
Uh-huh.
was that difficult to come back to the boat? Was it a tough decision, or
Oh,
how did that? Because I
I've
know you said in the book that you had read another book about optimism that kind of helped you stay
Mhm.
positive or something.
Yeah, I read a book called Plan B, and it was how to build resilience. And it was great in that it taught me, because I was pretty desperate to try to figure out, okay, what could be a path forward. And it talked about like whether things that go wrong were personal, or whether they're pervasive, and whether they're going to ruin the whole thing, and whether they are permanent. And so when I thought about the incident that happened, I was able to say, like, okay, it wasn't that we were just terrible sailers. There's probably some beginners incompetence there, but I mean, also it's just we were in really bad conditions that were not forecasted. And two, from a pervasive, I thought, okay, if we get back on the boat, are we likely to ruin the rest of our lives? Probably not, but we might regret it for the rest of our lives. And
Yeah,
so that's kind of where I got is, I would rather. I'm not gonna lie, it was I mean, I can't even really communicate how much we flipped back and forth about to get back on the boat is the brave thing to do, or to get back on the boat is the foolish thing to do. And I felt like anybody would really, totally find me justified to say, peace out, I'm done with, like, I tried, I did my best, this is not good. And I mean, we got back on the boat and my stomach was in knots when we pulled out of port to go down the coast of California. And in the end, though, we decided I would rather try to be brave than to try to be safe. And,
yeah.
I don't blame anybody who makes the opposite decision, but for us, we didn't want to regret it. And I'm glad we kept going. It was the worst experience that we had. And we just had so much joy that came after that.
Yeah. I think you mentioned in the book that there was something in that other Plan B book that you read about. Basically, you were trying to tell yourself that this is all temporary, that this isn't going to be
Yes.
forever. Your kneecap is not
Yes.
shattered. And that's
Yes.
kind of how you have to look at all those rough times, even when I think you went back to it. You actually mentioned that portion of it while you were crossing the doldrums.
Yes.
And it was with all the lightning, and you have those moments where you're like, what the fuck am I doing out here? Like, why did I choose to be thousands of miles of land? And that's another part, it's like, how do you navigate those moments? Because everybody
Yeah.
has those moments on boats where you're just
And
like,
it's
no
like,
matter how good at times, go ahead.
I don't even think that it has to be like you're in the middle of the ocean. I think you can have a night in a rolly anchorage where you're like, I'm never going to sleep again. Like
I'm done.
yeah, dude. And so in those moments, I think it's really important to be like, no, this is not the only anchorage that exists. We can go find a we can go find a smoother anchorage. We can, but you're right. It's the permanence, the feeling that the anguish is permanent. That is really hard to fight through, but it's a great skill to have. Yeah, it's a great skill to have in anything that you do, but sailing just allows you to build that a little bit faster.
It teaches you a lot of skills. So we first met in Tonga. Me and my crew had just arrived after coming up from New Zealand. You guys were kind of waiting for a weather window on your way to go to New Zealand. And I remember being at Anchorage, and that actually day that you guys paddled up was like such a happy day, because we had finally like made it after our boat sinking and us going to New Zealand, finding another boat. And then we arrived in Tonga, and we were stuck in Tonga for like a week and a half on the dock with like 30 knot winds. It was horrible. We couldn't even leave the dock. So it was it was a bittersweet to arrive. And then finally the weather let up. We went out to that little anchorage, and then I see you guys paddling up in a kayak.
Yeah.
And I was like, wait, they don't have a dinghy? I was like, oh man. They crossed the whole Pacific.
I say we have a 2 horsepower 4-stroke engine. Yeah. Yeah, we crossed the
I
whole
mean, you're
Pacific
not
without an
lying.
outboard.
Yeah, you're not lying. But yeah, so you guys come over on the dinghy. I'm like, wow, I can't believe these guys, they sailed across the Pacific. That's their main thing. Like these guys are all, honestly, they're legends for being able to do that. And then while I was reading the book, I just started laughing when I think one of the people that helped you a lot, I think Hal, the rigger in Bellingham, which
Yes.
I've heard of him, by the way, but I'll have to, if I see him around the yard, I'll have to say hi to him and tell him that I read the book. But yeah, he said, so he referred to it as the divorce kayak.
Ye-
And I thought that was like so spot on because I can't tell me about, I mean, you guys had to have had arguments and issues like everyone else just hops in a dinghy, they fire up their engine, they go to and from shore to other boats, but you guys have to paddle everywhere, paddle and sink, and it's just a recipe for arguments for couples.
For sure. But one thing that I did, and that cruising, I mean, if you want to stay in shape, go cruising, because even if you have an outboard, there's so much just muscle work that you have to do. And there are aids that you could have, like mechanical or electric windlass assist, which we also didn't have electric windlass, so I pulled up an anchor every single morning that we moved around, so we were in pretty good
Nothing
shape.
to wake you up like a nice anchor pulling.
Exactly, especially like when it's stuck around coral, even though you floated your
Yeah.
chain. But one is that we learned to communicate quite a bit, and not only with the anchoring, but also with the kayaking. But what we were really determined to do, well, one is we had a small boat, a 34-foot Pacific Sea craft. Because of the canoe stern, it's a small boat. And so we did not feel like there was really a great place for us to put an inflatable dinghy on. What was nice about the kayak is we would deflate it on passages, on any kind of passage, stow it in the lazarette, and that was great. It kept the kayak in great shape. But we were determined to absolutely not let the kayak, impede us from going anywhere. So we kayaked for miles and miles and miles at a time, and sometimes it was awesome, and our communication was on point, and sometimes we dropped our phone in the ocean and we had to paddle through currents 5 different times because we were idiots. So it did introduce another challenge, but it was great for our fitness. And I think one thing that sailing does in general, and that the kayak reinforced, is that it slows your perception of time. The relativity of time really starts to slow down. Like imagine that you had been stuck in one place for a week and a half if you were not on the sailboat. Like in land life, to be stuck somewhere for 2 weeks, we were stuck in Tonga for 2 weeks, and it was hard, but time just slows down. And the kayak really did the same, is that, in an outboard or a little dinghy, you can go pretty fast anywhere you want. But on the kayak, time really slows down. But it ended up being a great thing for us.
Yeah. It's like, I always think of the time slowing down thing, and you can probably relate it to kayak versus dinghy. But yeah, you sail across the entire Pacific, go to New Zealand, and it takes you a year, however long it took you a year.
It took us 2.5. It took us 2.5 years.
For the whole thing, 2.5 years. Then you hop on a plane, you're back in 12 hours.
12 hours.
Like, this is not fair at all. Like, you're looking down at the ocean, you're like, we just inched our way across this whole thing, and now we're hopping in this plane and flying. Like,
yes.
And how brutal it can be out there, and all these dark nights, and flying fish like hitting you in the face, and whales crashing in your boat, and like everything that goes on down there. And then just a few miles up in the sky, there's people just watching TV on an airplane.
Right.
So crazy.
Yeah, it is really different. But I can't honestly say that I've had like an amazing life-changing experience on even a transoceanic 100%. Flight, but I'll never forget many of the things that happened to us on the long journey.
Of course. Sounds like the kayak then, and I guess sailing, this whole trip in general, probably strengthened your guys' relationship. Like, how do you look at your marriage and your relationship with Andreas now versus before? And I guess, was there anything that you learned about each other that you probably wouldn't have learned if you would have just had a normal life on land?
Yeah, so there are a couple things. One is so we were a double-handed crew, And so one of us was always sleeping and one of us was always in the cockpit. We did not have any unattended watches. Maybe one time in the middle of the Pacific when there was nothing around, we both went inside for an hour. Other than that, somebody was always in the cockpit and somebody was always sleeping as we were on passage. And so one is we had to learn to trust each other. This is a big thing for him, is to be able to sleep and trust that I was going to make good decisions and that I could handle things that came up, and let him know at least, okay, I need to wake him up now. But the small things, he needed rest. Otherwise, he couldn't make good decisions. And so, there's one story when we were sailing from American Samoa down to Tonga. I think it was our second night. It was a terrible sail. You should never have gone on that sail. And the wind, we had a wind shift that was sending us to Fiji. And we had no intention of ever going to Fiji. We didn't have anything against Fiji, but that just was not in our plan. And when I woke up to take over, he said, we don't have an angle to go to Tonga, so we're going to Fiji. And he had to go to sleep. And so he had to trust me that I was going to watch, that I was going to make right decisions to try to get us back on track. And so I think that's one of and we did it. I was able to adjust steering just slightly, and thank goodness the wind shifted. But so even that night, he had to trust that I was going to make the right decision, that I was going to make tactical decisions that would get us where we needed to go so that he could sleep, so he could make better decisions when he woke up. So I think he would say that he learned to trust me. I learned to trust him. He was always the person who really made the final decision as captain on whether we would go with a weather window or not. And time and again, he showed himself to be competent and somebody that I could trust with my life. The sail from the islands, Tonga, Fiji, Vanuatu, New Caledonia to New Zealand can be one of the most treacherous in the world. I mean, you get caught in those low pressure systems that are coming up from the Tasman Sea. And, we watched the Queen's birthday storm video where you see real footage of, 20 boats where they're rescued, from terrible conditions. So that's a tough passage, and he deliberated for days on which weather system we would take, and we had the best sail that I think we could have ever hoped for. So I learned to trust him. So I think he learned to trust me, I learned to trust him, and then I think the final thing would be, I'm trying to think, what did I? Oh, I'm a very social person. You could probably see even right now, even your listeners
You're
can
in the
see
zone.
that.
Oh, yeah.
I'm a social person, and so I had a support network all around me, all the way up until we left. I had friends. I had the friend that I called when I wanted to drink margaritas and have fun. I had the friend that I called when I wanted to have a serious discussion. I had a friend that I called when I wanted advice. I had my parents, I had my sister, I had my brother, and I had this whole network of people that were around me that were my support network. And when we crossed, we did not have Starlink. And so we had very little internet. We would go a month at a time without having internet. And so Andreas became my one person. He was the person that I, had to go to when I wanted to have fun and when I was worried and when I was scared and when I was angry. And he had to be the person that I hiked with and swam with. He was like the one person that I had. And I'm not sure that that's healthy, like long term, that you just have this one person that has to fulfill all of your needs. But I think now it's been really good for us because he is, I'm not going to be so cliche to say he's my best friend, but he is the first person that I go to with everything because of that connection that we established on the adventure. So I think it's been really good for our relationship, despite all the fighting. Yes, we fought all the way across the South Pacific, we are still happily married. But in between the fights that anybody would have if you lived on a 34-foot boat, we have a lot of great fun and really memorable experiences. And we're really proud that we did it together. We did the whole thing by ourselves.
If any couple can survive that, I think that says the world about everything, because sailing and living on a boat, as you know, magnifies everything, and it brings out it brings out everyone's true character, because you get tested when you're uncomfortable constantly. You're constantly uncomfortable. So it's the best way to test that. So if you guys made it through that, I would say you're good to go.
I hope so. Yeah.
Yeah, let's see. I guess I asked you about this. Yeah, I guess so. You're extremely extroverted, obviously.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Andres is introverted,
Uh-huh.
and I guess is it get annoying sometimes? Like it's obviously very important to understand that he's introverted and not
Uh,
take things personal, especially during those long passages. And I'm sure there were probably times when he's like, "Man, if I just need some quiet right now," because you probably just wanted to chat and chat and chat. And how important is it to kind of understand that he's different, and that you guys are just come from two different sides?
Yeah, so we are opposite in many, many ways. One, I think we're similar in that we're both driven, we're both open to culture. So I think that's one of the reasons, one of the driving factors why we wanted to go across the South Pacific, is we wanted to be part of new cultures and to experience them firsthand. And basically any other way, we are opposites. He is very much an introvert. I'm very much an extrovert. He is a great problem solver. I just throw money at the problem, which, well, yeah. So there are quite a few ways that we're quite different. One thing that I think somebody advice that a cruiser gave to us. What was her name? They're Swiss couple on Data Tux. So if anybody's sailing out there is run into Data Tux, I said, what do we do? I was scared to death of a problem coming up on the boat, while it was just the two of us that we couldn't fix. And I read a book while we were cruising. Actually, I read a lot of books, but one of them I read was Quiet, and it was about introverts. And one thing I learned there is that they need silence to kind of process things. Like they need much fewer input to make decisions or to work through a problem. And the lady on Data Tux told me, when something goes wrong on the boat, you shut your mouth, you be quiet, you hand him whatever he needs to fix the problem, and you let him fix it, and he will fix it. And so for me, that was really important to have that advice, because we ran into other couples who had had similar experiences where they were trying, the more extroverted partner who was maybe not the problem solver was like, what do you want me to do? What do you want me to do? Should we do this?
Yeah.
Should we do that? Should we do this? What if we do this? What if we do that? And I learned very quickly, like the first splash that we had right before we were going like to set off, we had an airlock in the engine intake, like raw water intake. And so I learned right then, okay, I'm going to shut up. I'm going to let him troubleshoot this problem. If he says, hand me a wrench, I'm going to do it silently. And that technique worked out really well for me as we crossed. I think what was harder, what we anticipated being hard about the adventure is we thought we're going to cross the ocean. It's going to be very lonely. And I worried as an extrovert, how am I going to handle it? But if you've ever sailed, you will know the community that you have sailing is
It's the best.
amazing. It really is. And what's neat about it is that you all come from very different places. You might come from different cultures and countries. We were definitely of a different stage of life than most of our fellow sailors. Most of them are
Of course.
retired.
Yeah.
But you still had a lot in common and had things to share and had shared experiences.
Hmm.
And so as an extrovert, I was really shocked at how rich my social life was as we sailed and as we went on the adventure. And I think it was really important for him to realize, okay, we need to develop some friendships so that Katherine can have, the social time that she craves in between the 8 days at a time that we were out at sea by ourselves. So
Just
in the
like
end, it
you
worked
need to
out.
just like you need to give him his space to fix his things and be quiet.
Uh-huh.
Which I'm the same way as Andreas, by the way. And
Yeah.
I hate it when people are like, something goes wrong. Everyone's in my ear with some type of idea. I'm like, I just need silence. I need to process this myself, and then I can get through it. But he also has to understand, like, okay, in order to keep her happy, we got to do all these social things, and we got to get out there and meet people, which is it's just like kind of almost the biggest reason everyone goes to all these places. You go to the places for the beauty, but the best experiences end up being because of the people and the people you meet along the way.
For
you don't,
sure.
you don't go for the people, but it ends up like the difference between you going to a place and you being like, oh, that place was fun. It was all right. It was good. We would go back, and the difference between you being like, this place was awesome. It was the best. It's all on who you meet, because you could meet the right set of people, the right set of buddy boats, the right set of friends. And you you're clicking, everything's magnified, and you're doing everything together, you're having fun, and it's like this place was the best. And then you could be in the most beautiful place in the world and it's gorgeous, but if there's no one really around, it doesn't quite make it that rich. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. Oh, for sure. If have you seen the movie Into the Wild? It's based
Yes.
on a John
Yeah.
Krakauer book, and
Yep.
I might butcher the quote. I'm not sure I have it exactly, but basically at the very end, he said that the protagonist, the hero of the story, was in this beautiful country in the wild, and he wrote, "Happiness is best when shared." And I felt
Yeah.
that's such a poignant ending. Like, you can say, he's a fool, that's fine. There are probably some foolish things that he did, but it was so sad. It's so tragic. Not that he died chasing a dream, but that in the end, when he had gotten his dream, he felt, I wish I had shared this with somebody. And we went to the same anchorage in the Sea of Cortez, La Gringa, I think it was in Baja California, the north, I think, in by Los Angeles. And we went the first time. It was fine. It was a protected anchorage, and it was okay,
Yeah.
And then we went back 3 months later, and we ran into friends, and then we ran into their friends, and all of a sudden we were in a hillbilly water park. We were tying, like, the tides were such that that it had created a natural lazy river. So we tied fenders together in a very, hillbilly way. We tied fenders together to make floats, and we floated down this lazy river created by the tides, and we had a clam bake, and we had parts, and it really, the people transformed this anchorage that's pretty mundane into this magical, memorable experience that was one of the best memories that we have of our trip. So for sure, the people make a big difference. But I don't think that you have to sail to have that experience. I think it's easy when you're
100%.
in your like normal routine with your normal people to just kind of go around with your community and do like routine things. Like, we always go here, and we always do on Tuesdays we go for beer here, or on Thursdays we watch Netflix. And I think
I
one
would
of the
say
key,
it's almost easier to do because you're in one place. Because that's the thing about
Right.
sailing, because you're always going around, and you can have this really, you could be on a high for a week, 2 weeks, a month, and then all of a sudden everyone scatters. Then you're back to ground zero
Right.
again. And when you're in one place, which is something I've really focused on since transitioning from sailing, even though I'm on a sailboat right now, is sticking to one place, like building a community of friends. Because it takes time to do it, but that at the end of the day, like, what makes all your life and your experiences better is all those laughs and having those people around and that connection.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I would encourage you, even if you stick with the same community, to try to do memorable things with that community. We did a salsa night when we were in Santa Rosalia in the Sea of Cortez, and you can do a salsa night even if you are in Palm Beach, Florida. So with your group of friends, trying to make a memorable life, even if it is a life on land, I think that's possible. And I think it's worth
100%.
the extra effort to do something memorable with people that you love.
100%. What advice would you give to a young couple on a budget right now who's interested in sailing around the world?
Yeah. A couple things. First is charter. I would absolutely recommend that you charter boats and you see what you like and see what you don't like. We were a part of a really reasonable charter out of Seattle, and there was this really cool boat. It had this blue, and it looks like it goes so fast. And so we didn't want to go on these boring old boats. We wanted to go on that boat because it looked cool, it looked fast. So we rented it one day, and it was crap. It was so slow. It did not sail well at all. And so we learned that day, it's good to get experience on different boats, because you learn, okay, this is really what I want out of a boat and what I absolutely don't. And so that gives you, it just gives you perspective on what's out there and what's
sure.
the boat for you. 2 is do the work yourself. Because if you, it's easy to pay people. I'm not always sure that that's the best way. I'm not sure you always get quality. It's kind of hard to find people you can trust to really do the quality of work that you really need to be done if you're going to take the boat offshore. But what you really learn is where everything is and how everything functions. I have never changed my own oil in my whole life, and with our own 4 hands we replaced the diesel engine, which that was how I learned, because I connected the raw water intake hose to the strainer and then put it to the impeller, because I
Oh, that's how
connected
the
all
cooling
of those.
system works.
Exactly. And so when things went wrong, like I was telling you, when we had an air bubble, and we knew, okay, this is where it might have come from, and this is what we need to do to fix it. And so when you do the work yourselves, you learn so much about the boat that it always pays dividends to know your boat. So that would be the second. The third is how our South African rigger always told us that a watertight boat is the prettiest boat. And so whatever you prioritize, make sure it's a reliable keel or a reliable rig, and that it's watertight. We sailed from Tonga to New Zealand, and we had a great sail. It was a little exciting, but pretty nice. And people came 2 days behind us, and they did not know that they had all kinds of leaks on their boat. And so there was a leak over all of their berths, all of their sea berths, all of their beds, all of their closets. And they got to Tonga, and everything they had was just soaking wet, which is a really rough way to do a passage. And so definitely focus on watertight vessel.
Yeah, that'll expose your boat to leaks really fast. On our way up to Tonga, I knew we just didn't really. We were trying to make the end of the cruising season, and we did so many projects in New Zealand, but that wasn't. We rebedded some stuff, but I was like, okay, everything basically forward of the mast is probably gonna leak. And then we ended up in some rough weather, and the bilge pump was going off probably every 5 or 10 minutes for 3 days. There was so much water coming in the whole forward berth. Like, my friend Hannah, who was sleeping up forward, it was just really rough, so she couldn't sleep up there anymore. So everyone was sleeping in the salon, sleeping in the aft cabin. But
so if you have time, I would definitely recommend that. A dry boat is a great boat.
For sure. Well, what advice would you give just as far as, like, if they're deciding whether it's something that is for them or not for them, where they don't know anything about it, like what's going to be good about it, what's going to be bad?
Yeah. I think if you're considering it, and a lot of people are, because the YouTube channels are really popular right now. I mean, I'm in Missouri right now, where I'm visiting a family, and you wouldn't think that there'd be a lot of sailors, and all the time I get asked, "Oh, you like Delos? Or you like La Vagabond?" And I'm like, "Well, I mean, not really, kind of, a little bit." So I think it's out there, and a lot of people are interested in it. I think if that's where you're learning what it's like to sail, just approach those videos with the mindset that they are having to create content. They're having to, they want the drama. They need to show you the drama. They might not show you always how hard it is. And also they might not show you exactly what you said, like how boring it is sometimes. But that's part of sailing. And so I would definitely, if you think that this might be for you, get on the water as much as possible. And test it. I wouldn't sell everything and go off like we did until you've been on a boat for at least a week to know, is this going to be okay? But one thing, I wasn't a sailor, and there are a lot of uncertain people out there, especially women. I have met a couple of people who the man is the one who is uncertain, but most of the couples that I've met, it's the woman who's a little bit uncertain. And so what I always say is make a list of things that, intrigue you about the lifestyle, and make sure as you're planning and as you're working through where you might want to go, that's taken into account, because you want the life to be filled with things that motivate you. And so for me, that was snorkeling. I wanted to go snorkeling. Like, that's one of the big things, the big attractions for me. And so we planned a lot of our places based on where I'd get snorkeling. So I'd say that's one. And then two is, if you're uncertain, think about what skills you have in your normal everyday life. I was a procurement executive, which is, you would think, well, that's not a captain of a ship, or that's not exactly, the equivalent on a 34-foot boat. But I used my procurement skills in ways that I never imagined I would. I was the one who was responsible for buying all of our food, which as you're doing ocean passages, or even if you are going into countries that you're not familiar with what's available, or if you're going to islands where there's not a lot of food available, that's a skill that I needed to have that I brought from my old life. And so think about, what motivates you, what would bring you joy, and chase after that. Don't let that fall to the wayside. And to bring all your brain on deck and bring all of your skills and see what can I bring to this adventure that will make us a successful adventure.
Yeah, I think I would just say to someone, like, it's important, you have to be, in order to get into that lifestyle or into, I guess, sailing, and just, you have to be a jack of all trades. And it's completely fine if you don't know anything. And most people start out not knowing anything, but you have to be the type of person that can teach yourself everything. You have to be the type of person that actually gets excited or motivated to read books about something, to watch a bunch of YouTube videos on things, read through manuals and parts manuals, how to rebuild things. And yeah, that has to be something that you're interested in. And then I think the other thing would also be, that I've just really realized over the last couple of years, is just to prioritize. I figure out what it is you want to do, but make sure, if you obviously have your partner, which most people do, then that's great. If both of you guys are on board for it, that's really important. There's also a lot of people that go sailing where one person's basically been dragged along and they hate to be there. So I would say just definitely prioritize who are you going to be on the boat with, who are you going to be on board with, because that's going to make or break your experience completely. If you're on the board with the right people, the right crew, the right partner, it could be the best time ever. But if you already know going into it that there's maybe a little bit of friction and one person's not fully on board, or if you're not sure, if you're maybe interested in going alone, that's a whole different topic. People who sail alone, we probably, I'll save that for another solo sailor or something. But yeah, I would just say prioritize who you're going to be around, and that you have to be the right type of person to teach yourself things.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you are interested in going on a boat and you are not the person who owns the boat, I would highly recommend that the captain, and that I'm on a women who sail forum, and there's always questions about what do I do if the captain does this, or one guy that I heard of from a friend said he only had female crew and you had to wear a bikini at all times, and I was like,
red flag.
Yeah, I would get off that real fast.
And then,
absolutely.
And then they post on Facebook, and they're like, oh, is this normal? Because this captain said that he only has female crew. It's what do you think the answer to that question is?
Yeah, and I mean, I also if you're going offshore, especially if you're going offshore, your life is in their hands. Really, I mean, your crew was very fortunate that you knew what to do, that you had a plan, that you were competent when the worst thing that could happen, basically happened. And so you imagine, okay, if I was on this boat and we got hit by a whale, can I trust this person to make the right decisions that are going to save my life? And your crew was lucky enough to be in that situation.
Did this person prepare properly? Because that's what I tell everybody. I didn't do anything special. Everything I did that mattered was all preparation. So that's at the end of the day, that's a huge part of it.
The other day, I saw somebody on a forum who said, I just decided that I'm going to cross to Mexico and I'm going to leave next week. And I'm thinking, oh, yeah, I would never get on a boat with somebody who was making that kind of decision.
Who wants to come?
Yeah, really. And I'm like, no, and no experience necessary. Oh, I want a little experience. How are you about it?
No experience necessary. First time.
But also, I mean, in general, to people who are interested in this dream, in any dream, whether it's sailing or whether it's hiking the Appalachian Trail or the PCT, or it's going on a van from Alaska to Chile, whatever you have a dream, I would say that it's absolutely worth it to chase after that dream. And so if you're in a position where you have this dream, go for it. And try to achieve it. I think it's worth it in the end.
100%. Let's see, because we're getting close to 55 minutes now. I have some quick questions at the end, but I will just say, I guess you kind of answered this. The kayak definitely helps, but what advice would you give to people on how to stick to like a healthy routine while they're living on a sailboat and just living that lifestyle? Because it's really hard, and people like their routines, like to do things at the same time. Everyone wants to stay active, wants to stay fit, healthy. A lot of people do. Some sailors, all they do is just drink and eat fried food. But yeah, what do you have to say about that?
Yeah, the kayak absolutely helped. I mean, we also, because we did a lot of our own work, I scrubbed the bottom of the boat all the time. And so
there's so many people right now that are saying like, that sounds horrible.
I know. And I love to swim, so it was not that bad. I mean, I'm not saying like I love to do it.
Depends where.
Yeah, but yeah. Yes. And depends on how clean it needed to be, you know? I mean, if I had to really scrub it or how bad if I put it off.
For sure.
But also take advantage of all that nature has to give you. I mean, you know, it's easy when you're on the boat and you're comfortable to say like, do I want to get on my wetsuit and on my gear and get in the water? Yes, the answer is yes. You know, lean in, say yes as often as you can. Do I want to hike this mountain? Yes, you want to hike the mountain. So I think that's something I say in the co-captain's log, is I talk about how I lived according to the rule, say yes to every invitation offered to me. And that worked when it was extended by, you know, to me from people. But also if you see it as the invitation that the country extends to you, you know, by the fact that you're there, that, you know, you can hike this mountain or you can snorkel this reef. You know, say yes to the country, say yes to what is offered to you at sea. And that's how we stayed in shape. We hiked every chance we got. We snorkeled every chance we got. And yeah, we hoisted a lot of stuff. And I had a manual windlass that that also helped.
Did, I guess
I had healthy defaults. Like, you know, it's easy to push a button, but it's healthier to actually lift the chain myself. So healthy defaults, I would say.
Are you the type of person that likes, like when you're living a normal life on land, likes a routine, likes to have things planned out? I take it that you kind of are. But yeah, just likes to do things at the same time. You wake up, you have your coffee, you do whatever, you read a little bit, maybe go to the gym or go to work and do something. So it's really hard to get into a routine. Like nothing's predictable on a boat. Every day is different. And you can just like, if you're the type of person that loves routine, it can be really challenging to live on a boat. So yeah, as far as that goes, how did you struggle or how did you like cope with all that?
You know, I would say that I did a pretty good job not like giving in.
Not fighting
because
it, yeah.
I didn't fight it. Yeah, I would say that to write the book, the co-captain's log, I really had to be very disciplined and I had a routine, and that's the only way that I was able to like be productive. But on a sailboat, I think I decided the purpose of this adventure is not to be productive. It's not to produce this, you know, to have results at the end. It's to enjoy, you know, the moments that I'm given. And so I don't think that I fought it. And in the end, I think that allowed me to be nimble and to just accept what was given to me. And a lot of times that was an unexpected surprise. Like that was, you know, if you have a routine that I always eat inside my boat, then when you're offered, you know, hey, would you like to come to our house? We'll cook dinner for you. Then you miss out on a lot of those once in a lifetime opportunities. So yeah, I didn't fight it. I just gave in and I had great results.
I love that.
Come from it.
I'm going to read a quote or I guess an excerpt from your book. It was on page 348. It says, disillusionment hits and it hits hard. What are we doing out here, thousands of miles from land, soaking wet and scared to death of lightning strike? So yeah, so we talked about this earlier a little bit. When you're sailing and there's those moments where you have yourself like, why am I doing this? What am I doing out here? And in those moments, it's really easy to like go down this negative spiral of pessimism. And just to go back to that, what are some like when you get into that mindset where you could go down that negative path, what are some strategies? Like, what do you tell yourself in order to avoid doing that?
Yeah, so we had that's in the night. We were in the doldrums and we had squall after squall. I mean, it broke our instruments. We had the pelting rain. We were cold. What you did not read is that we decided, screw it. Our foul weather gear was like collecting water. And so we were sitting in puddles and we're like, screw it. We're just taking all our clothes off. So we sailed naked for a couple of days because it was just so miserable to have any clothes on. So that was pretty rough. The thing that helped me in that particular time was, normally Andres, our routine, as I was just talking about, would be that I would be asleep and he would be awake. And in that moment, what was really comforting was to be next to Andreas and to know that I was not alone in this. And so, yeah, like I was saying, I didn't fight the routine. I just gave in and I sat next to my husband and we held hands, like little kids that were scared. But it was really comforting to know I'm with him and we're going to make it through. I had another experience when we were sailing from Bora Bora to the Cook Islands, and we landed in Suaru, and I had a terrible night. On that one, I did not wake him up. I took the whole miserable shift by myself. And on that, I just really thought, I can make it 5 more hours. I can make it 4.5 more hours. I can make it 4 more hours and 29 minutes. I just held on
goes so slow
yes,
sometimes.
yeah. But I just thought, I can make it. This will not be this way forever.
Yeah.
And so sometimes, one thing I did is I would listen to jokes. Like I found one thing I learned after I broke my leg. There was research in the book about resilience that said that humor is really good for you in moments of struggle. And so I read a couple books, or I tried to listen to a couple audiobooks on the way that were just so dramatic and tough. I mean, the character was going through such terrible times, and I thought, I can't try to survive and help the character survive at the same time. So on moments like that, I would turn on like comedians. I had stand-up comedians and joke shows, and that's what I would listen to, and that really helped me to get through some of the tougher night sails that I had.
I always find in any bad situation, whether you're in like a really rough sail or anything that's not related to sailing, or for us, example, even like after we got into our life raft and the boat sank, there was so much adrenaline, and we I think there was definitely a moment where we all were just laughing because we were like, what the hell just happened? And somebody said something about, and you just have to laugh at some point because it's good for you. Like sit in that, just sulk in the crappy moment is not going to do you any good.
Yeah. So one thing that's not in the book, because it happened after we came back, is I was in St. Augustine Beach at my in-laws' house, and my sister was up visiting, and we were swimming. I was like, it's a beautiful day for a swim. Let's go for a swim. And we took boogie boards out there, and it was really calm. And then I noticed we were out probably farther than we should be. And so I was helping my sister swim in, and we got within the breaker, and I stepped in a bear trap. And I thought, that's strange. Why is there a bear trap in the ocean? And it was not a bear trap. I looked back and I had a fin on my foot. And the only thing that my mind could imagine was like the old time cartoons where the cartoon character steps in the bear trap and it kind of clamps around the foot of the character. And not a bear trap, it was a shark. So I had a 5-foot-long bull shark that was on my foot. And I kicked it off. I was really lucky that I was able to get it off me.
He didn't bite down, did he?
Oh, he did. Yeah, he did. Yeah. He clamped all the way around my feet. Yeah, my toe, my big toe.
Keep going.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so I knew like I have to get this shark off me as soon as possible. So I kicked and then caged. I caged for, 20 seconds, and I was able to I felt the release of pressure. And we swam in calling, call 911, help, call 911. And I walked on shore, and I just did not even know if I had a foot left. I remember like kicking, and finally I stepped out of the surf and onto the sand, and I looked down and I count 10 toes. And so I sighed a big sigh of relief, thinking, okay, at least I have them, but if something needs to sew them back on, they are still like reattachable.
Yeah.
But they're there. Yeah, at least like put it in a bag and let's go to the hospital. So there were lifeguards on shore, and they triaged the foot and then sent me to the ER. And turns out if you get bitten by a shark, you don't have to wait in line at the ER. So they pulled me right through. And the ER attending doctor, once she said, okay, I think you're going to be able to keep all of your toes. She sewed it up a little bit, but not so much. She said that sharks are not known for their dental hygiene. And so she left a pretty gnarly, I I have pretty gnarly scars that look like a shark decided they want to be
You are a shark attack survivor.
I
You are a
am.
badass.
I am. And, I don't know about badass, but I'm a survivor. And so after that happened, like
That's your
after
party
she
trick
said,
now.
exactly. Yeah. So B said, here, you can use this cream to reduce the appearance of scars. And I was like, don't you dare. I want that scar. I earned that scar.
Yeah.
But once it happened, like once I knew, okay, I'm going to keep my foot and probably keep all my toes. I don't know. We started laughing and we kind of turned the whole situation into like a 2-person floor show in the ER because yeah, the adrenaline just makes you want to laugh. And I think that's great. I think that's your body's reaction to saying, like, to help you get through the trauma. And so if your body, I think you can trick your body into having that same reaction. So if you're going through a really tough time, don't listen to emo music. Listen to watch funny things, be around funny people. And eventually I think that the laughter is really good for your brain and really good for your psyche and just helps you have a more positive attitude. And so, so we were laughing in the ER and I'm not sure how many people do that, but we were.
I love that. Yeah. You don't think a lot of people laugh in their life raft either, but I think it was the same thing. Like once we survived and just like you realized once you had all your 10 toes, like once we realized, okay, our boat sank, it's gone, but we're all alive and we're actually okay. And we're floating, no whales coming back to attack us. And I think we're going to be all right. That's when, I don't know what happens to your body, but we just all started laughing and kind of making jokes about everything. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's really crazy. That's funny. I didn't even think about that. Did you ever have a moment like a couple days later where you kind of crash? Because I did 3 days after my fight. I was like, I cried all the time. I was like, I'm still alive. I was laughing. Now I'm crying. But for me, that phase.
The next morning, I remember I called my brother because the boat that rescued us had Starlink, and the whole day was obviously just crazy. And then once we got rescued, I slept a little bit, woke up in the morning, and it was just like a dream. I was like, what just happened? I'm on a complete stranger's boat. And I called my brother and I just started like crying like a little girl. I just started crying. I let it all out because that boat meant a lot to me and like the trip meant a lot to me. And it definitely at some point it all hits you. And then it definitely lasted for a little bit, but then it didn't take long for I was like, okay, yeah, it was an accident. Still love the ocean. I'm not like I'm not scarred by it. I don't think there was some exposure therapy that had to happen on the way to Tonga with thousands of whales, as you know. But, But yeah.
Yeah, it's somebody I just saw just a couple weeks ago, there was a news article. There was a guy like bitten by a shark on the same beach 10 years apart, like 10 years later. And I thought, that's going to be me. I probably will, I might be bitten by a shark again. I hope I'm lucky the second time too. But I plan to get back in the water. I mean, I'm headed to Florida in just a couple days, and I plan to get back in the water and swim.
That's what exactly like after a whale sank my boat. I'm like, well, the chances of that happening again are even more slim. So I'm like, good, we got that out of the way. Like I can sail anywhere now. No whale's gonna hit me. I don't know how true that is, but that's how I choose to look at it.
Yeah.
How did it feel when you left the boat in New Zealand and said your goodbyes?
In one way, it felt a huge relief. I mean, we took such great care of that boat, and to have it in such great shape meant that we spent days and literally like years of our lives doing fiberglass and running cable and us doing sealant to trying to fish wires through the mast. And so there was a sense of relief that, okay, we're done with the hard work that is just living on a boat if you're going to keep it in shape to be able to cross oceans in it. So there was some relief of like, okay, the waxing of the boat that I have to do all the time is done. But then also we felt exactly like I never want to wax another boat again. But I think it's funny because the Summer Olympics just occurred this past summer. And I heard a lot about the Olympic blues, which is when, the people who win, even if they win at the Olympics, even if they're a gold medalist, the day after the Olympics is such a letdown because they accomplished this dream, but now all of their whole life had been built around this one goal. And what do you do when that's no longer part of your life? And I think we experienced that. We were so proud to have accomplished what we had wanted to accomplish. We felt so strong as a couple. We had such great memories. So it was a success. I mean, we had a lot of setbacks, a broke leg. We had a lot of problems. We did what we set out to do. But still, we felt like, okay, who are we now if we're not cruisers? Who are we now if we're not boaters? And I think that who are we now question is a question that comes up whether you're a sailor or whether, you've accomplished or transitioned away from any other kind of life stage is figuring out who are we now. So I think there was a little confusion about that. And then sadness that we didn't build the boat with our two hands, but we refurbished every inch of her. And so, and she'd been a great boat. She took really good care of us. And so it felt like taking your favorite dog to the pound. We were so sad. Luckily we did sell it to somebody that we think is going to enjoy her and plan to take it back up to Tonga. So we hope she has many more nautical miles under her keel.
It's like sailing. It's like basically saying goodbye to a friend. Yeah.
Like your best friend. Like your best friend that carried you across an ocean.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
100%.
So it's pretty tough.
100%. But yeah, I know what you mean last year with the whole, what do you do? Who are we now? thing.
Yeah.
And after I met you guys and we sailed Tonga, we cruised Fiji.
Mhm.
And then my partner and I split up and things just changed. And I decided to put the boat up for sale and just give that up and basically end that phase of my life. But when I got back home, I crashed really hard and I struggled with that identity kind of change and identity crisis. And I battled with that for months, but I think I had so much energy and passion into working on yachts and then working on my own boat and getting my boat ready. And I was just working around the clock. I was like a madman. People that were around me on boats were like this. Yeah. I just never stopped working towards that. And I think that's the key. And there's always this low period after you reach one goal or one milestone, one mountaintop. And it's figuring out just what you have that energy and the passion is there. You just have to figure out where to redirect it. And that can.
And how did you decide? How did you figure out this is what I want to do?
Right now I'm doing marine surveying, which I'll get into that as well. And then I wanted to just I have so many things that I want to do. And that's probably been one of my biggest problems in life. I'm just so interested in so many different things. And it can be a bit of a paradox crisis where you just want to do everything, but you can't really decide. So you have to just stick with one thing. But really it started, I was kind of in a depression for 2 months, and it really started with just getting to the basics, writing everything down, journaling, okay, who am I? Who do I want to be? And writing down everything to the last detail, what I want my average normal day to look like. What are the things that I'm interested in? What are the things I'm passionate about? And connecting all the dots and putting together a puzzle. What are the skills that I have now? What are the resources I have now? And then I started just I want to take care of myself physically first. I started going to this CrossFit gym and I met a bunch of new friends there, and that was really good. And then once I started doing that, I decided to use my skills for marine surveying. I didn't really at the time have any interest in actually getting back on boats because they're just so much work, and I've just been down that road. But I was like, oh, this will be great. I could get into marine surveying. I could help other people who want to do what I've done, help them choose the right boat. Give them consultation, take them down the right path. And that's been really great, especially when I have clients that call me and they're like, hey, I'm interested in this boat. And we want to fix it up and sail around the world. I'm like, perfect. Let's go check it out. I'll crawl through this. I almost do an extra good job for those people. I don't even I still charge them obviously my normal rate, but and usually we end up going for a drink afterwards or going for dinner, and we just end up becoming friends. So I've really learned to it's so nice that I can take all those skills that I used before and then have them in a job that has a lot of flexibility where I just work for myself and I can kind of bounce back and forth from Bellingham to Florida if I want to. It started out, I guess, just really writing everything down. And then once I did that, I realized that, I'm actually pretty good at this. I think this is good. Took me a while to get busy, and then I started to get busy. Then I was like, wow, you can actually make pretty good money doing this. And Yeah, it's a great thing that I can do forever, but I always want to add more, and that's probably my problem. Is I want to just
Yeah.
keep doing more and more, and I'm interested in
Yeah.
so many different ideas. But surveying is a great thing that I can honestly say I'll do for the rest of my life, and I'm still trying to add little bits to that. I like podcasting because I like the idea, I guess, of sharing actual useful information with people, things that people can get value of. And I got
Uh-huh.
really into podcasts like last year, and I
Uh-huh.
was like, wow, these things actually really helped me at the time. So it'd be really cool to like do something that could actually help someone else. So that's
It's funny. I talk about in the co-captains like a couple. I didn't mean to, but I included a couple podcasts that I was listening to as the stories were unfolding, and I
yeah,
included them. Actually, I mentioned like this, so I totally agree that the podcast can be super helpful and transformative and
yeah. It's just like
educational and
everyone's
practical.
Yeah, we're all, there's always someone else who's like going through whatever you're going through. And it's the biggest thing is like to know that you're not, whatever you're thinking of doing, you're not doing it alone. So it almost really doesn't matter what you're talking about as long as you're just telling the truth and kind of genuine. I think there's probably somebody or something that can relate
Benefits.
to that. So
Yeah, I
yeah,
agree.
just trying to keep building on that. Okay, so we're getting close. We're pretty late now. I have a couple. You can just answer them quick questions.
Okay.
You don't have to expand too much. What is the
Okay.
best part? What is the best part about sailing?
Oh, the night sky. Yeah. Then I love
Night sky.
looking at the constellations, especially in the middle of the ocean or somewhere where there's no light pollution. I love it.
What is the worst part about sailing?
Yeah, I would say squalls, like the fear knowing that you could be hit by lightning at any time and you're just out there without electronics. So yeah, I think that was pretty debilitating.
How about the best part of being back on land?
Oh, definitely washer and dryers. For sure. Absolutely. Having, being able to do your laundry regardless if it's raining that day is
The simple
super
things
helpful.
in life. Yeah, I always say what's really nice is being able to walk out your front door and your house is right where you left it.
Exactly. Or like another house has now like in the night moved into your house and damaged your own house. Yeah, that's
Right.
also.
Yeah, exactly.
It's funny
You
though.
don't have to
I
wake
woke up.
in the-
Yeah, I woke up in the middle of the night a couple months ago and the window was open and I sat up in bed at 2 a.m. and I thought, there's a wind shift. And then I thought, it doesn't matter if there's a wind shift. Our house isn't going anywhere. So yeah, that's pretty nice.
You're like, yes.
Yeah, I was like, I'm just going back to bed.
It's really nice. I think everything's just so much easier and simple. It's easier to be productive on land. And there's definitely a lot of good things to it and bad things to it. So would you say at this point in your life where you guys are at, I guess just as a couple, you guys are definitely happy with your decision to move on from the boat and like transition? Usually you're not really sure where it's going to go, but you're happy with what you decided to do. Happier on land.
I think that we're happy now. We're happy that we did it. We're happy that we're on land. I think, being content where you are is really important and we needed to come home and we're happy here. When we were at the Nablus boat show, Andreas said, you know how some women get baby fever? I have boat fever. And so I doubt that we're, forever off a boat. Or I bet there will probably be another boat in our future, but one with less wood on the outside.
100%. Katherine Gonzalez, thank you so much.
Yeah, my pleasure. If you want to hear more stories, I have stories of whales that are not quite as rough as yours, Rick, but whales and warships and fun stories and sad stories and exciting stories. You can get it at the Co-Captain's Log on Amazon.
Is that the easiest place to order it?
Yeah, it's probably, and it can be on Kindle. It'll be soon on audiobook, but you can get the paperback on Amazon. Just make sure you do the immersive multimedia experience about halfway through the book and cross the Pacific Ocean with us.
It was a great book. I was really impressed by your writing and Andreas's writing skills, by the way, in his things. But yeah, thank you so much. I'm going to pass the book on to someone else.
Great. Appreciate it. Thanks for your time, Rick. And thanks for what a fun thing to be able to meet you again all the way across the world.